Hello and welcome to today's Protecting Data in the Cloud with Veritas NetBackup webinar, brought to you by Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation. I'm Amanda Sharp, Marketing Specialist at Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation, and will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn this presentation over to our presenter, Chet. Chet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome everyone to today's presentation. We hope you get a lot out of this. Today we're going to cover NetBackup in the cloud in a couple of different formats. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Our agenda is going to start off with deploying NetBackup infrastructure in the cloud. We'll get into how that looks, the components of it, the do's and don'ts, things along those lines. We'll cover Veritas MSDP. We'll then move into S3, Azure, Blob, Google Storage, and the various cloud types. We'll proceed to Veritas CloudPoint, and then we'll finish up with some tips, tricks, and considerations. These are the nice little bullet points that will gain you a lot of in-depth secrets and some do's and don'ts, some gotchas, things like that. So let's start off with the deploying NetBackup infrastructure into the cloud portion of this. One of the reasons for going this route, this is one of the methodologies for leveraging cloud, and this involves deploying your NetBackup installation, much like your on-premises, into a cloud environment. So when you're doing this, you want to consider a lot of things, and one of the chief concerns or things to consider is, does this meet the business need for offsite data protection, cloud storage, or other cloud objectives, and taking into consideration your RPOs and RTOs to make sure you're going to meet those. Deployments and sizing, structure, what kind of space you'll need, the number of servers and such. The tools that you currently use to size your on-premise environment are the same tools you use for those. So it's very similar to going on-prem, except you're now going into the cloud. And as I indicated, it's sized similar to your on-premise configuration. So if you were to leverage cloud versus an on-prem, if you were to migrate that, so to speak, your sizing would be very similar. There are a couple of different configurations to look at. One of the configurations is a master media as a standalone, the same server. This is going to be just where your master media server and your storage are all one server. This is great for smaller footprints or a small environment, but for larger workloads, you may need to expand that. So you may look at separating your master server from your media server and allowing your environment to be expandable that way. And again, the tools that you use for this are the same tools you're going to use for your on-prem. So that's a really nice thing. And if you can leverage that experience of what you've been doing on site in the cloud. Both AWS and Azure Marketplace provide NetBackup templates. This is the Insight recommended path to leverage these templates to start your deployment, and those are going to cover a lot of the basic installation components for you. It's a template of the machine that you're going to deploy into the cloud. Some items of note: all of your backups are going to require agents. This means VMware VMs require the agent to be deployed on each VM to back it up. You're not going to be backing it up leveraging the API, where traditionally in your local environment you would tell NetBackup about your VMware vCenter server, enter some credentials and leverage the API. You're not going to be able to do that in the cloud deployment, so that's one big consideration. Generally, all resources should be cloud-based to avoid egress charges. This is another kind of point in going with cloud. Depending upon the cloud provider's billing mechanism and where you're going to get billed, you want to look and see if you're going to get charged for egress. This is data moving to and from the cloud. Some providers leverage the downloading of data, if you will. If you're pulling data out of your environment, that's where you're going to pay for it. So you'll need to consider that in what methodology you use. Right now we're covering deploying NetBackup infrastructure, the entire NetBackup environment into the cloud. There's another method we'll cover later on in this presentation. And to determine what's right for you, there's some considerations and bullet points, and we'll cover those as well to help you determine which method is going to be the best for you. So going back to getting to avoid the egress charges, you want to just evaluate what type of layout you want to use, and you want to try to get it all into the cloud. So you wouldn't want to have, say, your master server be on-prem and a media server on the cloud, because that metadata is going to be coming down from the cloud, and you could get charged for that, and it may lead to a surprising bill. So that's one of the considerations. Error and duplications are supported. Just be aware of the cost of those. The key difference between the two, error is going to be your replication, and this is two NetBackup environments. So you have two separate master servers. You might have one on-prem and one in the cloud. And if you are using error, you're going to be replicating data between the two master servers. Or duplication, which is having a master media in the cloud and maybe a media server local, or some other form of hybrid where something is local and some of it is in the cloud. You could incur those charges, but that would be in the form of a duplication. These are both supported, but it's something to consider when doing your deployment. So let's move into the MSDP part. For those of you running NetBackup, you're familiar with MSDP. This is a media server deduplication technology that is installed on your media servers. This is going to allow you to leverage deduplication, but there are some limitations and some considerations in these two formats I mentioned earlier about having a standalone master media server. And you'll see in the top diagram here, you'll see you have a single master media server, and you have clients that are going to back up to that. Just like you're on-prem, you're going to have a master media server that's going to be handling the scheduling of jobs and the overhead, as well as ingesting the data and storing it on MSDP. It is supported. Some of the considerations is the storage. Based on the storage you're using, whether you're using solid state or some form of a spinning disk, whatever tier of storage you're using could get expensive. So if you were to leverage solid state, those are going to be typically more expensive, and it's going to cost you more for the usage of those. The higher tier storage for performance is going to cost you more in your base cost. Now, this is separate from potential egress charges, but these are things that vary cloud provider to cloud provider, so you'll want to be aware of what those charges are going to be before you go ahead and deploy. Some key points to take away here are for a Linux-based master media server, specifically the media server, you're capped at 96 terabyte of MSDP. For Windows, that's 64 terabyte. And it does support deduplication or support duplication or error to and from other domains. So this is just essentially one format where you have a standalone master media server. It's just like having several sites, except you're leveraging the cloud. The other strategy you can use is to separate your master media server for larger environments or larger workloads within the cloud. You'll want to do that, separate out your master and media. And it's the same if you're on site as well. So these are very similar, and a lot of this looks very familiar. So moving on to the S3 connector. S3 connector leverages cheaper blob storage less resources are needed for the compute instance. Deduplication is not supported with this. So this is basically leveraging your cloud-based NetBackup environment, but also bringing into play the NetBackup S3 connector. You do have that ability. Since this is basically the same as an on-prem, having your existing NetBackup environment with in-house, this looks the same going into the cloud, but you can. This is just to indicate that you can leverage S3 even from a cloud-based deployment. So here is a typical example of what an environment might look like when you're leveraging Cloud Catalyst. This is one of the newer features of NetBackup. Cloud Catalyst allows you to push data up to the cloud and leverage deduplication. A couple of points to note here are that when leveraging Cloud Catalyst, you cannot have your master server also be the Cloud Catalyst server, so you need to have at least 2 servers in that environment. One will be your master, and the second will be the Cloud Catalyst. It's very similar to your on-prem setup. And I know I'm pointing this out a lot, but this is one of the key things, is that it looks just like your local environment, except you're leveraging the cloud to do this. You can leverage deduplication with some limitations. Each bucket is limited to 1 petabyte of raw data. Depending on deduplication ratios, this could be much more front-end data, but you're being able to leverage that deduplication engine, gives you that efficiency. Since Cloud Catalyst will be deduplicating the data, it will require more compute resources, so that should be monitored. Since we're actually processing data and chunking it up to create the deduplicated segments, that requires some processing power, and with that, some cloud providers, you're actually going to have to pay for that additional compute resource, so that's something to be aware of and something to monitor closely. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to CloudPoint. This is another option for leveraging the cloud. And this is going to look different than the NetBackup deployment into the cloud. CloudPoint, it's a flexible snapshot-based cloud solution. It's ideal for cloud-native workloads that are entirely cloud-based. So if you've migrated to a cloud-based environment, CloudPoint may be something you want to leverage. It is deployed either on-prem or in the cloud, so you can have it locally or in the cloud. There is a free version which is available for those who want to kick the tires and try it out, get a feel for what it's doing. That's something to look into. Like I said, there's a free version. Since it's a lightweight solution, there are some limitations. One of them is it does not provide granular level recovery, such as individual files. It does, however, integrate with NetBackup. So there's a little bit of pros and cons, and this is one thing to consider when looking at CloudPoint. Since you don't have file level recovery, it's snapshot-based. So you're going to be taking a snapshot, you'll bring that snapshot back. There are some methods to retrieve files out of there, but this is a key limitation of CloudPoint that you'll want to be aware of. Here we can look at a sample dashboard of what it looks like. And as you can see, it's a nice and easy to use and easy to manage simple dashboard here. It's a single pane of glass, and it's basically one interface for all your cloud vendors. So you can manage all of your cloud snapshots from one interface. There's not having to bounce from one web page to another. It's all in one web interface. It supports multiple clouds at the same time. It also leverages the cloud provider's snapshot API. So this isn't using a specific API. This is going to leverage the cloud provider's API. This reduces the need for additional configuration, and it reduces issues since it's using their native API. There's a lot less issues that you'll run into with that. The interface is simple and easy to navigate, which minimizes complex management. There's not a whole lot that you're going to have to drill into a whole lot of configuration. So it's a nice, simple solution for what it does. So let's look at some of the CloudPoint supported workloads. Let me go ahead and move this through. And as we covered before, we have a single UI for cloud vendors, for all the cloud vendors, multi-cloud support, and it's going to use the underlying cloud provider snapshot via API. So everything's done through API. Some of the supported cloud workloads. You have AWS supporting EC2, that's the Elastic Compute Cloud instances. You have Elastic Block Storage volumes are supported. Amazon Relational Database Service, or RDS, instances. And Aurora clusters are all supported through AWS. Microsoft Azure, you have virtual machine level and managed disk level. And again, these are your snapshot methods. So along those lines, these are the supported snapshots that you can take. And for GCP, you have disk and host-based snapshots. Now that we've covered some of the options, let's look into the considerations and some of the tips and tricks, and considerations for what's going to work best for your environment. One key point to take away from all of this is how to find the best solution for you. There's no right path for everyone. Everybody's going to have a little bit different usage or requirements, and how the cloud will meet those business requirements. There's different paths you'll end up on. For some, CloudPoint will be a better solution. For others, a full-blown NetBackup cloud deployment is what's needed. For the NetBackup cloud deployment, the best way to start out is small. Build a small environment in the cloud. You can always add to that as your needs grow. Additional media servers, additional storage, processing power, etc., can be added on. So that's one of the key benefits to using the NetBackup cloud deployment method. Either way you go, you'll want to manage your usage closely. So this is going to be a key point so that you don't run into a surprise bill that comes in for resources that you weren't expecting. So you'll monitor it closely. No one likes that sudden bill, that's for sure. Most times this can be avoided by monitoring your deployment. Understand your cloud provider's cost structure. That's one of the keys that goes with it, and that is understanding what you're going to get charged for. Is it based on the number of CPUs? Is it based on your disk tiers and disk performance model?
This meeting will soon be disconnected unless there is at least one authenticated user present. To join as an authenticated user from the phone, you must provide a valid extension and PIN.
So let's continue here. So understanding your cloud provider's cost and where you're going to pay for that. So monitoring those is going to be key to this so that you don't get caught off guard by any of these. If it's the transport of data, a lot of cloud providers are going to charge you for a restore or download of data. So that's something you want to understand clearly when you're choosing your methodology, whether you're going to go with a deployment in the cloud or if you're going to go with CloudPoint. Some providers charge more if your data is not kept for a certain amount of time. That's another consideration to look at. So you'll want to understand what the retention of your data is, so how often it's going to expire, because there are some that will expire data off. If you expire it off early, they're going to hit you with a charge for that. So just understanding that cost analysis before you choose your method is going to be key here. And understand also with that your duplication, replication. Are you going to be leveraging that, or do you foresee that in your near future? Take that into consideration. Also look at one key things you can do now is looking at your restore requirements. How often are you doing restores, and what is your average, size for that, and so you can be aware of those costs up front, and then based on your cloud provider's charge rate, you can determine what you can expect to pay. And in some instances, you may find that initially it looks cheaper for one method, but then evaluating the amount of restores or data egress charges you're going to run into, you may find that another solution is better for you. So those are some things to take into consideration. We covered the retention. The last item to consider is what solutions are right for your needs. CloudPoint, nice and simple, easy to manage, so you got that one interface. And if that's what you're looking for, and you're just looking for those snapshots and be able to roll back to those snapshots, CloudPoint may be the perfect solution for you. If you're looking for more in-depth, for larger environments, for other types of data, a NetBackup cloud installation may be the way to go for you in that regards there. But it's important to have all of these ahead of time while you're planning out your installation, where you're going to go, and this will help you make the best choice for you. Let's go to we appreciate you attending today, and with that, I want to leave you with last thought here. We're hoping this helps you on your cloud-based journey. There's a lot of variables involved in this. Our team fields questions on this a lot. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have. Either ask them in the questions portion of this session here, or feel free to reach out to our solution architects. They have these discussions with clients all the time. And so feel free to reach out. Let us know how we can help you best utilize the cloud. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Amanda. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for attending today's webcast. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 2 to 3 days. You will receive an email notification once the recording is available. Thank you again for participating in today's webcast. Have a great day.